The rain began just after sunset, soft at first, like a warning whispered against the windows. By midnight, it had turned violent, slashing across the sky with thunder that shook the earth and lightning that split the darkness into brief, blinding fragments of white. In that single night, while the world outside roared with chaos, Armin's world inside collapsed just as fiercely. He did not know that by dawn he would have nothing left, not his home, not his business, not the life he had spent years carefully building brick by brick. And yet, in the hollow silence that would follow the storm, in the ashes of everything he once called his own, he would meet someone he had never truly known before. He would meet himself. Just hours earlier, Armin had been standing in his small electronics shop, counting the day's earnings with tired satisfaction. The shop wasn't glamorous, but it was his. The faded sign above the door carried his name, painted by his younger brother years ago. The shelves were neatly arranged with repaired radios, second-hand laptops, and small gadgets that hummed with quiet purpose. For Armin, this shop was more than a business. It was proof that he had made something of himself after years of struggle. It was security. It was pride. It was identity. When the call came, his hands were still smudged with grease from fixing a customer's old television. His neighbor's voice trembled on the other end. There had been an electrical short circuit in the market. A spark, a sudden burst of flame, and then fire spreading like hunger through wood and wire. By the time Armin reached the street, pushing through the heavy rain, the sky above the market glowed orange. Flames climbed into the darkness as if trying to escape the storm. People shouted. Buckets of water passed from hand to hand. Sirens wailed in the distance. But the fire did not listen to fear, and it did not wait for hope. Armin stood frozen as he watched the fire swallow his shop. The sign with his name cracked and fell, consumed in seconds. The glass shattered. The shelves collapsed. The years of savings he had invested in stock turned to smoke that rose into the merciless night. He wanted to run inside, to save something, anything. But the heat pushed him back, a cruel reminder that some losses cannot be negotiated with bravery alone. By the time the rain finally conquered the flames, there was nothing left but blackened walls and the bitter smell of burnt plastic. The crowd thinned. The sirens faded. Neighbors returned to their homes, whispering condolences that felt small against the weight of his silence. Armin did not cry. He simply stared at the ruins, as if staring long enough might rewind the night. But the storm was not finished with him. When he returned home just before dawn, exhausted and hollow, he found another blow waiting. His landlord stood outside the gate, arms crossed, expression firm. The rent had been overdue for 2 months. Armin had planned to pay it with the next week's earnings. There would be no next week now. The landlord's words were not cruel, but they were final. Without payment, Armin would have to leave. He had 3 days. 3 days. It sounded generous. It felt like a countdown to disappearance. Inside the small house, Armin sat on the floor among his modest belongings. The walls seemed closer than before. The ceiling lower. He ran his hands through his hair, trying to breathe through the tightness in his chest. In one night, the shop was gone. His savings were gone. Soon, the roof over his head would be gone too. He had no family nearby. His parents had passed years ago, and his brother lived in another city, struggling with his own responsibilities. Armin had always been the dependable one, the steady one. Now he felt like a cracked foundation. As daylight crept in, pale and indifferent, the weight of reality pressed down harder. He packed what little he could into 2 old suitcases. Clothes. A few tools he had kept at home. A photo of his parents smiling at his shop's grand opening. That photo lingered in his hands. He studied their faces, searching for reassurance that wasn't there. For the first time in years, he felt like a child again, small, afraid, unsure of what came next. On the 3rd day, he handed the keys to the landlord and stepped out onto the street with his suitcases. The sky was clear, almost mockingly beautiful. Life moved on around him. Buses roared past. Vendors called out to customers. Children laughed as they chased each other down the road. The world had not paused for his loss. It never does. He did not know where he was going. He walked until his arms ached and his feet throbbed. By evening, he found himself at the edge of the city near an old railway bridge. The tracks stretched into the distance, 2 parallel lines disappearing into uncertainty. He sat beneath the bridge, his back against cold concrete, and let the darkness settle around him. That night, for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the full force of what had happened. The anger came first, sharp and hot. Why him? Why now? He had worked hard. He had been honest. He had sacrificed comfort for stability. Then came shame, quieter but heavier. What would people say? The man who lost everything in one night. The man who couldn't even pay his rent. The man who failed. Tears finally broke through, silent and relentless. They fell not only for the shop or the house but for the version of himself he believed he had been. Successful. Secure. In control. That identity had burned with the flames. As trains thundered overhead, shaking the bridge, Armin realized something terrifying and strangely liberating at the same time. There was nothing left to protect. No image to maintain. No business to defend. No expectations to uphold. He was stripped down to the barest version of himself, a man with 2 suitcases and a heartbeat. In the darkness, without the noise of daily routine or the distraction of responsibilities, he began to hear his own thoughts more clearly than ever before. He remembered the boy he used to be, the one who loved taking apart broken radios just to understand how they worked. Back then, he hadn't cared about profit or reputation. He had been curious, passionate, fearless in experimentation. Somewhere along the way, survival had replaced curiosity. Stability had replaced dreams. He asked himself a question he had avoided for years. If everything was gone, who was he without it? The answer did not come immediately. It formed slowly, like dawn creeping into night. He was not his shop. He was not his bank balance. He was not the approval of neighbors or the expectations of society. He was the hands that could fix broken circuits. He was the mind that could solve problems. He was the resilience that had carried him through childhood poverty and early failures. None of that had burned. The next morning, instead of returning to the market ruins, Armin walked to a nearby tea stall and offered to fix the owner's malfunctioning fan in exchange for breakfast. The owner hesitated but agreed. Within minutes, Armin had the fan running smoothly. The simple act of repair lit something inside him, a small but undeniable spark. Word spread quickly in neighborhoods like this. By afternoon, someone brought him a broken phone. Then an old radio. Armin worked under the open sky, tools spread out on a borrowed cloth, charging small amounts or accepting food when money wasn't available. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't secure. But it was honest. Days turned into weeks. He saved carefully, sleeping at a modest shelter at night. Each repair reminded him that his true asset had never been the building or the shelves. It had been his skill, his patience, his willingness to learn. Those could not be burned down. One evening, as he packed up his tools, a young boy approached him with wide, curious eyes. The boy asked how radios worked, why wires carried sound, how electricity could travel unseen. Armin saw himself in that curiosity. Instead of brushing him off, he invited the boy to sit and watch. He explained each step, each connection, each small miracle of engineering. The boy listened as if hearing magic. That night, Armin felt something deeper than relief. He felt purpose. He began offering free lessons to neighborhood children in the evenings, teaching them basic electronics using discarded parts. Parents who once saw him as the man who lost everything now saw him as the man who gave something back. Respect returned, not because he owned a shop, but because he shared knowledge. Months later, with savings built coin by coin, Armin rented a tiny stall, not in the crowded market that had burned, but near the railway bridge where he had once cried in the dark. He chose that location intentionally. It reminded him of who he had become when he had nothing. The new sign above the stall was simple. It did not carry his full name in bold paint. It read, "Rebuild." Below it, in smaller letters, "Repairs and Learning Center." On the anniversary of the fire, Armin stood outside his stall at sunset. The sky glowed orange again, but this time it was not from flames. It was from the sun setting gently, promising another day. He thought about that night, the rain, the fire, the emptiness. He realized that losing everything had stripped away illusions. In the darkness, without possessions or pride to hide behind, he had found his truest self. He had discovered that identity built on external things is fragile. Identity built on character is unshakable. He lost everything in one night. But in the quiet, unforgiving dark, he found resilience he didn't know he possessed. He found purpose deeper than profit. He found courage born not from success but from survival. And most importantly, he found himself, Not the version defined by walls and wires, but the one defined by heart and hands and hope. Sometimes, it takes losing the light we depend on to discover the light within.